Welcome back to another episode of the Becoming More podcasts. We're on episode 10. My name is Brett Yo. I'm Becoming Brett on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And today I'm here with Ben Phelps, otherwise known as Ben Jitsu, formerly Primal Bro on Instagram. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Brett. How's it going? Thank you for having me on so early in the life of this podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. I'm doing well today. We're recording on a Friday, so that's always a good day.
Yeah.
So I like to start off the podcast by asking everyone kind of the bottom line of their story, because I'm a big pro wrestling fan. So I stole Stone Cold's line. And so what is your bottom line of how far you've come so far in your journey?
Bottom line, I was overweight my whole life, up to my heaviest as an adult at 333 pounds. I lost 155 pounds from heaviest to lightest. And then I just started trying to do cool shit with this new body, right, so to speak, to make it really quick.
Awesome. And the reason I know we're early in the podcast, I wanted to bring you on because you brought me on your show a couple months ago, and we had a great conversation. So I figured I'd pay back the favor, since I think your show was the first place I talked about doing this show itself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so
happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. So you mentioned that you're heavy all your life, as far as you remember. What was your first realization that you were big? Was there? So for me, there was a moment where I was at a zoo, and I saw a picture of myself sitting on a statue of a rhinoceros later on, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely big. So was there some realization like that for you when you were young?
I don't necessarily know that this was the first time I had the realization, but there is one that sticks out fairly vividly. And it was in middle school, and it was the first time you had dances in school, right? So you would actually dress well. And the way that I would dressing on a day-to-day basis was it changed as it just, you do it to hide things, right? There's certain way, anybody that's been big knows what clothes to wear, how to do it. We've all made the same mistakes, like double layering the t-shirts and all that stuff. So I was good at hiding it on a normal basis, but then all of a sudden it's well, put on nicer, well-fitting clothes and tuck your shirt in. And I guess one of the first times where it really deeply bothered me. But it was, I don't know, like I said, I don't know that was the first time, but that was probably the earliest. And then obviously it just kind of grew and manifested in different ways from there on, right? Plenty of those moments.
Yeah. We all have those, because as soon as you tuck your shirt in, you look way bigger than you would do if you have it hanging loose and all that. And of course, double layering, I'm pro at that.
I mean, I think every heavy guy that I've ever talked to has done that at some point, double layering.
Yeah, because you don't want skin to show, so you're whatever it takes for this one shirt to be tucked in all the time, and then
if I can round this off a little bit, almost, right, it takes away some of the
yeah, exactly. So growing up, you said you were heavy. Were you an athlete at all? Did you play sports, or was it more video games and stuff like that?
The extent of my athletics as a kid, I played t-ball for 2 seasons, I think, and I played pee-wee football for a couple seasons. That was kind of a last-ditch effort to play on the size, right? Because I was always on the big side. Especially when I was younger, I was proportionately to other people. Now I'm 6 foot, and I would say I'm relatively average. I don't feel tall all the time, but when I was in elementary school, when I was a little kid, I felt tall all the time, and then I was also big. So football was a kind of maybe he'll be good at this, we'll leverage the size kind of thing, and that none of it stuck. And then it basically just became video games, big into video games, right? I had a lot of time at that point to read comic books, because I'm not an only child, but my sister is 16. She was 16 when I was born, so she's 16 years older than I am.
Yeah.
So I kind of more had 3 parents, sort of. She would babysit me all the time, but so I was alone, not in a sad way, but I was an only child, right? So comic books was a big thing, video games was a big thing. And yeah, it was just a life of inactivity like if the horror story that they paint of kids today, I was already doing like then. You know what I mean? I was ahead
Yeah.
of the time.
Yeah, I think of it every time I see whenever I watch football games and like they have that play 60 ad every
Yeah,
time. And I'm always like, yeah, that wasn't me. I mean, we
yeah,
would go outside and play sometimes with the neighborhood kids, but we lived in the city. But for the most part, it was let's stay inside where it's air conditioned and
yeah.
and nice and not have
Yep.
to go out. So and I was also similar. I was also like really like I was like probably 6 feet. I was like always like a head taller than everybody. So and now I'm like 6'2", 6'3". So it's a lot more normalized.
Yeah, everyone
Um,
caught up kind of, right? It's the
yeah,
difference
yeah,
isn't as big. Yeah.
yeah. Because I remember being like 6 foot at like 13, and I was like, yeah, I was like way taller than everybody caught up. Um, so throughout like as you're in childhood and like going into high school, like did you have like a time where it had like a really big gain, or was it always just kind of like inching up slightly?
It was always inching up slightly, I guess to answer it quickly.
Hmm.
It accelerated. There were 2 points because it was a continuous gain up to my heaviest. I didn't do a lot of dieting attempts like in high school or even like shortly after I graduated when I did college and any of that stuff. Um, so, but two big things were I got married young. I guess I'll start with the first one, which was I had my car, my license, I got a job, I had my own money.
Hmm.
So that like little dose or boost of freedom or lack of supervision, we'll call it, what that escalated it a little bit. And like, and the job choice was the worst. I worked at Domino's, and I would get pizza for free all the time, so it wasn't even a
Hmm.
point of having my own money because a lot of times I didn't even have to pay for it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
so
had similar where I worked in a movie theater and it was free popcorn
yeah,
all the time.
exactly. So it was like I was just it escalated a little there, and then when I got married and started doing like real life grown up stuff, I did the same kind of settling in that I think happens to everyone to some degree, where you just like, but what that settling in or kind of like, I don't know, we had kids and we were married and life kind of slowed down, so that allowed me more time for my eating to speed up, I guess, to put it really to oversimplify it.
Hmm.
But yeah, but it was a continuous gradual gain built on it was the same behavior and habits that I had when I was a kid. I just never really corrected, addressed, whatever, and they just kept spiraling bigger and bigger, and then boom.
Yeah, yeah. I was similar. Because I had the car early too, and it was very easy to just do it. Like instead of getting lunch at school, I just hold because we got out at school at like 2 o'clock, so I would hold off and go to Taco Bell
Mm.
at lunch. I just like get like a snack and then have Taco Bell for lunch at 2 o'clock, 2:30, whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
the same thing. You
yeah,
stop and hit a drive-through on the way home from school. So like eat lunch at school, have another meal basically on the way home, and then have dinner with your family. And then if it's a weekend, you sleep. But you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah,
oh yeah, 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 definitely. So you said you got married young. How old were you when you got married?
I was 20.
Wow, yeah,
Yeah, super young.
yeah, I was 24. Um, and so you have like a lot of like real life problems and situations to deal with, and that of course leads to more. It's easier to just go grab a bag of whatever you prefer, which is like for me it was pretzels and
Mm.
sometimes Doritos. What was your favorite like to go to snack back then?
Well, if we're talking snacks,
Yeah.
which is really hard. It's funny because like there are some tendencies of big people, so to speak, that I didn't have. Like things that I don't do, like breakfast. I didn't eat much breakfast or any at all, right? And snacking is a similar thing. Like I've never been big on snacking. I'd rather wait until I could get my hands on a large pizza, right? So it's
That's
hard to
fair.
answer the snack thing in all honesty, but chips were always easy. I didn't necessarily love them, but it
Yeah.
was like something to put in my mouth, I guess, looking back at it, as for lack of a better term. But yeah, I would mostly hold out for pizza because as funny as it is having pizza around all the time at my job, pizza, even before I could work when I was a little kid, pizza's always been there for me, right? You talked about like becoming an adult and dealing with grown up things, problems,
Hmm.
situations. It was like pizza never let me down, right? So that was always the big thing for me, honestly. Snacks weren't as big of a problem, but it didn't obviously necessarily help me not
Yeah.
get heavy.
Did you ever have it where, because pizza, I like pizza too. Did you ever have it where like, so you were eating with like family or friends or whoever, and like almost like it became a competition who ate the most?
So not, it's funny because I was the only one that really had that in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else could totally do go to the get together and like, you know, 1-2 slices at the party,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Whereas and it's funny because that was, no one around me would even come close competitively, right? If I wanted to
Yeah.
look back at it, not to brag, I guess. Um, but what I would start doing is be like, all right, so at 2 slices per person, there's 10 people here. That's 20 people. If they got 4 pizzas, and you start to do this really elaborate mathematical equation to be like, well, how many can I eat
Yeah.
realistically? So I would gamify it, but it never really got competitive just because I wasn't around anyone that pushed me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Probably fortunately, honestly, because it may have
Yeah.
exaggerated the problem that was already kind of
Yeah.
there.
So, because I was always like the biggest, like when we go to friends' houses for different like sleepovers and hangouts and stuff, and like a lot of times some of them would be like that because they were like skinny, and they'd be like, "Oh, I can put down more than you," and even though I was a lot bigger, but I would usually do 4, and then but the one guy did, I think he did like 7 at one time, and that's almost a whole pizza in
Yeah.
like one sitting, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's too much. So talked about your background getting into like being married. What was like the moment where you realized you needed to like make a change, and like this wasn't going to be like for you forever, like you don't want to be 333 pounds
Uh,
forever?
so I feel like I've said this a couple times, but there was no one particular trigger or moment, but the
Mm-hmm.
same group, there's 3 things that all kind of happened at the same, within the same, what felt like same week, but it probably more realistically was within the same month. But we had some family photos done because we had kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those photos and seeing myself with them being heavy, like I had seen pictures of myself before, and I saw that I was heavy, and it's funny because I just like it didn't hit me the same way. I mean, I never loved seeing pictures of myself, but then when I saw those, it like hurt different. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And I also was working at a local United Way nonprofit. So like they have chapters, so to speak, or like branches
Yeah.
locally. So I worked at one of those, and we shared a parking lot with a Wawa. So I would go to Wawa like either one time a day and get stuff for the day, or multiple times per day. And there was one point where I was walking and it was maybe like an eighth of a mile
Mm-hmm.
realistically. But like I remember how just being like feeling winded and just unrealistically exhausted. I don't want to make it sound like I was dead after walking that short distance, but dead enough to where it also kind of, it was like, what am I even doing? And then I had a doctor's appointment, and they bring up that I had high blood pressure and that I was pre-diabetic. Or maybe not. He said the word pre-diabetic talking about my blood sugar and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, but I don't know that it was an official diagnosis as much of a, this is the direction you're headed. But
Yeah.
either way, I heard the word and it was associated with me. So there were like emotional, I guess there was an
Mm-hmm.
emotional concern because of like the family picture thing. There was like a self-esteem realistically. I think there's an element of vanity and transformation, no matter what anyone says, even if it's not your top priority or it's not even the top 3. It's something that you think about. I would say maybe that's me being vain.
Oh no, I definitely feel that way when I look at, like, whenever I do the different transformation posts. Like I
Mhm.
look at myself now versus then, like the then photos, and I'm always like, I can't believe like that was where I came from, and then I'm
Yeah,
like, I look good now.
yeah,
So I think we all
exactly.
have that vanity.
Yeah, I mean, because it's funny. It's not a popular thing to talk about, but it's real. So I had like the emotional thing. I had a self esteem kind of conflict. I would lump both of the other experiences, both at the doctor and just walking through that parking lot. With It's funny, with my bag full of food, walking and just being like, man, this is hard, or this isn't right. as I have a bag full of like you said, like mostly I would get packs of donuts. Maybe if we want to go back to my snack thing, I like those little sleeves of mini donuts.
Oh yeah.
But that's irrelevant. But yeah, so I had like physical health concerns. It hit me kind of like in all the places all at the same time.
Mhm.
To like light the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's just that it's like that accumulation of factors that just lead you down to this path because you're like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. So after you meet with the doctor and like you go through all that, did you have like did you like go through a certain nutrition program at first? Did you? I mean, I know some of the story already, but we'll tell everybody else.
Yeah, no, for sure.
uh, so do you have like a certain nutrition, and then or did you work with like any professionals on like getting a program in place?
So I always just kind of, I enjoy nerding out on fill in the blank topic. Like if I get interested in something, I really like to get fully interested in it. And that manifested when I wanted to eat better. I did it I went out on my own. Right. And initially, say like, if you want to talk about first Google session, I I remember being like overwhelmed because I started to get into all the things that I now can easily manage and recognize. But these things, like talking about macros
Mm-hmm.
and like controlling calories and tracking your food, and just having zero experience and having paid like no attention to food before, all that was kind of intimidating how complicated it felt or seemed. But quickly, and I wish I could say exactly how I stumbled onto this so early. But the first thing that I did was the Paleo Diet. And then shortly thereafter, stemming off of that, I did what Mark Sisson wrote a book called The Primal Blueprint. So I guess I'll slow it down a little. So I had paleo first and then quickly transitioned to the Primal Blueprint. And essentially I was eating more or less the same diet, doing both of these like terms or labels. But the nice thing about the Primal Blueprint in that book I was reading was that it also had um, lifestyle and fitness tips. And the big appeal to all of this, the nutritional approach of both paleo and this Primal Blueprint thing, all the fitness and lifestyle tips that laid out in the book, is that they all spoke to this, whether it be factually correct or incorrect, they all spoke to this logical piece in my brain, which was like, well, you're an animal. We evolved from animals, right? And animals in the wild continue to eat a certain way. And you evolved to eat a certain way. And now that's kind of been corrupted by this like modern food system, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's Whole Foods. People might know about Whole30 is probably a little more popular than either of the paleo or primal, but it paints a picture essentially like if it has a pulse or it comes from the ground, you can eat it, right? So like no grains, no sugars. That's really the big two rules. I could have all the fruit, potatoes, meat, eggs, just like clean eating whole foods. And I did that for about a year and a half, and I lost 124 pounds doing that. And that was like my first stint or my first like expedition on this journey. I lumped this all into one journey, but that unfortunately, because I got down to 209 doing that, and unfortunately that was followed by a large regain too, which I don't know if you want to dig more into the diet I started with or that, or just have me keep
Yeah, sure.
going with it.
Just so when you went to because like I know quite a few people have done the Whole30. I didn't
Yeah.
do that myself, but I know about it.
That one's really popular. So that
Yeah,
was why I even brought it up. Because I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
most people know this.
yeah.
Yeah.
People would know that. But paleo, so and the Primal Blueprint. So did you find when you did that, like that was pretty simple and easy for you throughout it? Because so often like we see people that start a diet, I'll call it that, because they're not ready for like a lifestyle change. And
Yeah.
then they do it for like, they're like, oh, I can do it. Like that. You always see like the first day, it's like, it's day one. And then they're like a weekend, they lose like 8 pounds because they lose all the water weight. And then we do week 2 and they lose a little bit less, like 4 pounds or 3 pounds. And then week 3 comes and they start to slide because they realize sometimes they can't go like full bore into it because they're not ready. And like I always pump up doing like small changes because it's easier to make small changes than to make like huge drastic ones. So did you find that difficult when you made the switch, or did you do it kind of more incrementally?
For better or for worse, I tend to be an all or nothing person, right? Like, so for me, it was just like flip the switch. This is how I eat now, more or less, right? It was
Hmm.
just like, boom, now this is what I do. And in all honesty, it was incredibly easy. And I say this with pride. I'm a proponent of tracking. I think it's something everyone should do. I'll say that to disclaim the next thing I'm about to say, which is that I didn't, for that whole 124-pound loss initially, do eating that way. I
Hmm.
didn't track my food at all. Just eating the quote unquote right things kind of obviously balanced or regulated the calories. It wasn't that I obviously wasn't restricting calories, right? But I just wasn't consciously doing it. It was still happening.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to the better food choice. But I loved it because I felt like I was eating like plenty. I could still kind of hit that. I would always do limited meals. You can call it intermittent fasting, call it whatever you want, right? But like I said
Hmm.
earlier, wasn't a big breakfast person ever. So I've always liked to do 3 meals is like the most, right? I really
Yeah.
like 2 like real good meals because it still gives me that, it still satisfies that like inner fat kid, right? That'll never
Hmm.
fully go away. It's just, I learned how to manage him, and that's one of the tools, right? Is by eating larger meals of just quote unquote better foods. So yeah, there was actually, it was incredibly sustainable for me. Diet was not at all the reason that I fell off and had to regain after I initially lost the weight. It was more of a mental thing. And again, I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead, but I always like to say that I tell people like I lost weight. I lost over 100 pounds twice, right? What's
Yeah.
ultimately what it comes down to. Because I gained back 80 pounds after I did paleo. So I got up to 289. I remember that being the heaviest number that I saw in that after that point.
Hmm.
And I always tell people that it's because I did it quote unquote the wrong way the first time, meaning what had nothing to do with the diet, had nothing to do with the workouts. Like I did a lot of kettlebell stuff. I was kind of doing everything right and doing everything pretty well, right? Like again, not to sound braggy, but I had a relatively easy time with the weight loss function of it, but I never really took any time to address any of the mindset stuff, really. Like the Primal Blueprint book put an emphasis on like rest and relaxation and play, like have fun, right? It,
Hmm.
it it did these little sprinkles, excuse me, little sprinkles of like mindset, mentality, lifestyle things.
Hmm.
And they kind of helped, but at the end of the day, I thought that I would just automatically become a happier person by losing weight, right? Again, to oversimplify things. I thought if I lose weight, I will be happy in every aspect of life, which when I say it, it sounds really dumb, right? Like to think that or to say it out loud, it sounds like silly. But that's what I believed. So then once I got 209, I felt good. Like going back to like, I was like, I feel like I look good, but why am I not
Hmm.
happier? Right.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. And then that was kind of like we talk about we always talk about the moment. We've talked about a couple of like moments on here that inspired good change, right? That kind of put me in a good direction. That was kind of the moment or the feeling that sent me in the opposite direction for a little
Yeah.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, I had similar when I lost my first 100 pounds, I did it like basically a Weight Watchers version, and then like I didn't do any mindset stuff, and then I maintained for like a year or about 6 months, and in the 6 months I gained like 10, 20 pounds, but until I like so many people like they worry about like going to the gym, and I always say like that's like that's the last 10% of what's gonna impact your journey. Like
Yeah.
so much of it is like mindset and then nutrition. I mean, nutrition's really most of it, but the mindset, if you can't get the mind right, you're not going to get where you want to go.
Yeah. Regardless of diet or what you're doing in the gym, I guess I say that, but I look back at me and it's like, well, I could do all of those things really effectively because like, but I think for anything to stick, I made changes, but I didn't, for any of it to actually stick, I would have had to kind of, I like analogies a lot. So I might use a lot of them, a handful of them today. But I think a good example of that is like, well, I was building this structure, building a house, but I never fixed the foundation, right?
Mhm.
So like it didn't matter that I could get the house all the way built, it's still going to crumble, right? It's just
Yeah.
doomed for failure. So that's kind of the way I looked at it. It's like I could execute on all these weight loss functions really well. I could be disciplined, right? I could stay motivated or be disciplined when not motivated. I executed really, really well, but I never did anything inside for any of it to mean anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, all right. So we talked about like your first 100 pounds. So after you gain back, you go up to 289. What was it that you did the next time when you realized that you needed to get back on track and get back down to where you had been before?
so this turning point wasn't nearly as dramatic. It was more instead of something happening where I realized I needed to change, I was almost on the entire time I was gaining the 80 pounds, which happened in about 6 months, which is kind of extreme to me, again, looking back at it. But um, I, it wasn't this like big health scare moment or anything like that. It was just kind of like me working through some of the mental things that I didn't work through before. Right. So I had addressed the mental side of it. I'd gone to therapy. I'll just be transparent at that point. I'd seen a therapist. I had done a lot of work to kind of fix the upstairs thing. And then I was like ready to kind of recommit and get back into what I was doing, and going back to how well paleo, or let's just call it whole foods, a whole foods diet, going back to how well that worked for me. I just went back to the same resources online that I was using the first time, same blogs, the same Instagram pages. But now all of a sudden kind of intermixed or intertwined into this paleo sphere was the keto diet, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that had me interested, and it did kind of a similar thing. Like I said, as why I did paleo in the first place, is it spoke to this really simple, logical part of me. It was a little more complicated, but I was also a little more versed at that time just in eating better as a concept.
Yeah.
So keto just kind of made the same simple, logical sense. I started keto in a different place than a lot of people do, because a lot of people they'll start keto and they do a lot of like hot dogs and Quest bars and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like because I had done paleo, I basically just took the same food selection, the whole foods concept, and changed the macros. Right. This is the time I started tracking anything.
Mm-hmm.
Was when I got back into it. So then I started to learn a little more about macros and about calories, and I got a little more experience with tracking. But
So,
so
so
keto
changing
was sorry, go ahead.
so changing the macros, because I mean, for people that don't really know what I mean, most people already know what keto is because it's so popular. But for people that don't know, what would be the difference between like paleo and keto in your macros?
So again, paleo was so simple that the term paleo doesn't necessarily indicate any sort of macro split at all, right?
Mm,
It is more of a food macros are food quantity, whereas paleo solely focuses on food quality, right? To differentiate the two. So paleo allowed me to have like tons and tons I ate a lot of sweet potatoes. I ate a good amount of fruit. So like a lot of things that wouldn't fit well in the low carb, higher fat approach that keto kind of requires.
mm-hmm.
So like all it really did was I would eat the same steak or burgers or chicken or whatever I would have when I was doing paleo, but instead of having potatoes on the side, it would just be broccoli. And in all honesty, when I was doing paleo, I avoided dairy for the most part. But when I started keto, that was something I kind of reintroduced. So while I lost some food options, I gained some new ones. But in terms of macros, uh, I never tracked them on paleo, but I'm certain 100% that my primary fuel source, if that's what you want to call it, was carbohydrates. Right now, my approach is so nuanced or just weird that I kind of lump carbs and fat as one so macronutrient, so to speak. So we can get into that later, but yeah, I did a low carb approach which is what keto was, with paleo food selection just meaning whole foods. So I did like a whole foods keto when I like recommitted. That was the approach that I took, and that I rode that most of the way to my lowest weight, but not quite all the way.
Okay. And how long did it take you on the keto diet to get from like the 289 down to your almost lowest weight?
So keto was keto was about a year, because so it was about 18 months on paleo. I lost 124, and then I did put 80 pounds back on in 6 months, and then in just about a year, like 12 months exactly, I think that was what I did. That was when I lost the weight with keto, and then after that with keto, I hit a bit of a stall. So, but to answer your question, it took me 12 months, and I got to 185. That was the lowest that I got with that specific approach.
Okay. And you just mentioned a stall, because I know so many of us have the stall at the plateaus. Where was that stall in that? Was that at the 185 or was that higher? And like, how did you handle that when you had those stalls? Because I mean, so many times you hear people that they have the stall to the plateau and they just give up because they don't want to keep going.
So I, again, for not to sound braggy, but I'm good at the discipline, the execution part of it. So I was also disciplined enough to when I initially stalled out, it was like I said, it was at 185. I've been doing keto for like a year. So when I initially stalled out, I was patient with it. But I floated around that 185 mark. Low 185 was the bottom. I would go between like 185 and 187, and it would just kind of stay there. And I was there for call it 2.5 months. And then I participated in it. So I started getting antsy. Maybe I guess to address what you were saying, like people get frustrated with stalls. I did start to get frustrated. I was patient, just like everyone recommends you should be. Cause again, I can execute well. But then once everyone said it was going to work, and it still didn't budge. I didn't really adjust macros too much. But then when I start to explore what my options are, which again, go back to getting a little tighter with my macros, changing my approach, it just so happened to kind of line up with going back to like this keto online world that I was dabbling in. It was World Carnivore Month 2018. And so I did the entire month of January. I ate nothing but meat. And that in 2 weeks of that, I broke the stall from 185. I got down to 178. And that was the lowest recorded weight that I've ever been at. I sat there for maybe 2 months. And then since then I have put weight back on, but in good ways, not in the ways that I did when I gained the 80 pounds back. So it stuck this time, you know what I mean? But I did carnivore, even though I put weight back on. I did carnivore. World Carnivore Month turned into about World Carnivore 18 months for me. I did that for a long time. And then I went back to keto just because I was kind of done. Like carnivore had done everything I needed it to do. I was putting weight back on. I was getting more intense with exercise. I did keto, and then now here I stand eating whatever I want, quote unquote, right? Like it's conscious eating, tracking. Again, we can talk as deep or shallow into that as you want. But yeah, like I'll even though now, if you come to my page, if you listen to this podcast and you come to my Instagram page, you're going to see someone that very much looks like if it fits your macros style dieter, right? But I'm never going to be the person that bashes any of those labeled diets because they were really powerful for me. I'm a little more accepting and tolerable of those. I don't poke as much fun at them as a lot of people do online, just because they have a soft spot, right, in my heart.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of see any of them as a tool, the same as like surgery can be a tool for some people, or some people just need, like, to go to AA for other addiction as a tool. Like, you just need to find the tool that works best for your problem.
100%.
And so we can get into what your current like nutrition looks like. because we're kind of getting towards that point. Like how did you said you kind of described it, but how else would you discuss it?
So, I mean, my approach right now is really, if you're at all familiar, you, anyone listening, whatever, if anyone's familiar with Dr. Ted Naiman, he kind of coined the term, or really put a focus on something called the PE diet. And that's like a ratio. It's performance or protein to energy ratio. And that's why I said earlier, I kind of lump carbs and fat now into one category, because I just view those as energy, right? I
Mhm.
bundle them as one thing. So I focus on eating a higher protein diet. It is on the high side of protein, and that I enjoy that. Even when I was keto, not to get too off topic, but even when I did keto, I did much higher protein percentage wise to what a lot of people would consider a keto diet to be. A lot of people think lots and lots of fat. And while I did have a good amount of fat, I did higher protein. I've just always enjoyed that personally. Um, but yeah, now it's just controlling calories, which are much higher now than they were at 178 pounds, 185 pounds. And I am still quote unquote concerned about my weight. So I do still track most of the time. I'm trying to be conscious of my calories and my macros and my body weight. But most of my focus now, diet from a dietary sense, fitness perspective, it's all kind of shifted to athletic performance. And my diet is almost an extension of that. But yeah, I'm open-minded now. I eat carbs, I eat fat, protein. I eat whatever I want from time to time. Again, like go within reason, right? I just have so much more control and knowledge and capability now. So yeah, but that is like, I guess that gets me all the way up to today, so to speak, from a dietary sense. Is like it looks much different now than it did at any point through my weight loss success, but the way that I lost weight was necessary for me to get where I am now.
Yeah, yeah, because now you can maintain better than you could when you were at, than losing at almost 300 pounds or over 300 pounds. So you mentioned while you were talking about the current nutrition, that you kind of have it built for athletic performance. So obviously your name on Instagram is Ben Jitsu. So I know that Jiu-Jitsu is a big interest of yours. How did you get started with that?
So I'll try to be respectful of your time, but I like to take this one, not take it back, but I've always been interested in like fighting, for lack of a better term. I never got in a fight, right? I can say that proudly, but I was always interested in fighting. I liked boxing when I was a kid. I remember when UFC got real popular when I was like a teenager, kind of, it started to really explode.
Mhm.
But my dad and I, like, the biggest thing that we ever shared was we would watch movies, like we'd watch Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, any movie that involved martial arts is like a central focus of it, right? We loved it. And it's I looking we can, this is a whole nother topic. But I always look back at it and like wish I had started sooner, but you can make that argument for anything. It's a negative mindset.
Yeah.
But like, I am surprised that at that time I didn't show more interest in learning any of that stuff, just because like I loved it. um, and I still do. I still eat up like a martial, like I'm super excited, again, going off topic, for the Shang-Chi movie that's coming out, because it is Marvel's like martial arts movie, right? And it's
Oh yeah, for sure.
so it's like two things that I love in one. So I'm like tremendously excited for that. Uh, but always interested in martial arts, really big fan of UFC, whatever. So again, the second time I lost weight, having addressed more of the mental stuff, I realized that I needed something to kind of focus on with life after weight loss, quote unquote. I wasn't even done losing weight when I decided to do this. I just kind of rewarded myself for getting under the 200-pound mark. So I started in September of 2017. I started jiu-jitsu. And then since then, I've gone probably an average of 3, but anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, or 2 to 4 times per week, like literally every week, unless I'm on vacation since then. And it's like, I was hooked. Like I was just all in, right? And now that is the biggest focus. that's the biggest thing that I care about. So my nutrition, instead of having some kind of physical goal, like a body weight goal or even a body fat percentage, and short of having any kind of physical goal, my goals all kind of now revolve around jiu-jitsu. Again, when it comes to why I'm eating the way that I'm eating, or like working out in a certain way or whatever.
Yeah, and that's great because like I feel like so many times like you need, like having that thing, whether it's a like obviously athletic endeavor or just like some people just a hobby to like have something that focus you, right? Because like if you're just like for for people like if your work, school, family, like where's like the thing that's like you can do that's outside of everything else that kind of gives you like I don't want to say purpose, but to a certain extent, like a purpose or just to like blow off steam or whatever it might be.
I always tell people to try to find a thing. Like that's the same word I use. This is the one that you used. It's like, doesn't even bonus points if it's physical, right? Like jiu-jitsu, people really into CrossFit or bodybuilding or running, people like marathons, or even you to some degree, like with all the walking, right? Like that's a similar thing. And it's like, so if it's physical, that's bonus points. But at the end of the day, having something to focus on and put that same effort, like if you can successfully lose weight, then that's good. But I think that you're going to need to redirect all that energy you spent for so long, right? All that focus on this one thing. Now you don't like, you're not using as much bandwidth. Here I go with another analogy, right? It's like, you're not using as much bandwidth for that thing. So it frees it up. So what are you going to do with it now that you have extra, right? You find your thing and you can try to put it into that. It can be painting or like knitting. It doesn't really matter, right? Write a book. I don't care, but find something that like engages you where you can put that like same energy that you put into yourself and weight loss, you can put it into something else.
I mean, that's basically kind of why I started this, because I needed something. I mean, I still have a bit to go, but I know that I'm coming up closer to the end than I am in the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's where that's what kind of spawned doing this, because I was just like, I want something like, and to have something also that can be impactful in a way for people, because I can't tell you how many people that I met just because I heard them on different podcasts, like met on Instagram, right? Because I'm just like, hey, I heard you on so and so's podcast. Are you on your podcast? And I just like just hit them up because I'm like, we have similar things that happen, and you have a lot of shared common interests or common situations. So one thing I like to ask everybody, I know we talked about jiu-jitsu already, but I usually to ask each guest about some hobby or interest outside of weight loss. What would be another one besides jiu-jitsu for you?
So if we can go way back to the beginning of the episode when I talked about how I spent my time as an inactive youth, and comic books were always a big part of that. I still like to read them if I can. I always try to find time to make time for every movie, TV show. It doesn't even have to be DC or Marvel. And specifically within comic books, here I go. This is going to turn into a lot. Within comic books, like there are non-superhero comic books, and those are great. There are some really good ones, like the Tith and Postal. Like there's some really good non-superhero comic books, but again, kind of in the same way the martial arts movies and the kung fu movies hit this like special spot in me, like superheroes kind of does the same thing. So I love me a good, even it like it's predictable, they're going to win, whatever. People say all these things, and I eat it up. Like I love a good superhero story. The comics are better a lot of times than movies and TV shows and stuff like that, because the comics can go a little more into the world of like, well, what if they don't always win? Yada, yada, yada.
And it's funny when you mention the predictability, because like I remember when Avengers Endgame came out and people are like, oh, like how predictable was that the Avengers would win? I'm like, you didn't actually expect Thanos to win, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So like that was, they circumvented that superhero movies are boring logic by ending that one on such a like, they snap everybody away, right? And then it's like credits. You're just that's it.
It was almost Empire Strikes Back level.
Yeah.
Of like shock and down, ending on a down note.
People cried in
Yeah,
the theaters.
I remember watching people cry. It was the Peter Parker when he
Oh,
goes.
but
That's what
yeah,
killed. That's what just got
that's what
people
killed.
going. Yeah,
Oh, they got him.
that's
Yeah.
what I started hearing, like sniffling, and I remember me and my one buddy went and we saw like the first show that night, the first night, and he like just turned around. He's like, what are these morons? Because he didn't get it at all. Like he doesn't get attached like that. But yeah.
That's hilarious. But yeah, so and that was a long-winded answer for a short question, but I really like comic books. Specifically, I like superheroes. That's
What so like were there certain ones when you're like that you like the most, like certain, because so for me when I was a kid, I haven't read comic books in a long time. I have a on my shelf, right, you can't really read it, but I have the Killing Joke. That's the one the one I have now.
yeah,
Because I got rid of as a kid, I got rid of all my other ones.
that's a good one though.
But I was a big X-Men fan as a kid. Like that was my comic and show.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have that as a ringtone sometimes.
I love that. That's
And
great.
and that and the Batman animated series were my like top two. But I mean, they're great. Were there certain ones that were like your go-tos or your favorites to pick up, or were you just like, let me just have everything I can get my hands on?
So it goes back to when I like something. This has always been since I was a kid up till now. When I like something, I like really like it, right? So I'm fully in. I'll take anything again. Like that's why I go back to, like, I've read comics I like that aren't superhero stories, but there's just something unique about a superhero story. And for me, it's Batman. I first of all, in the comic book discussion, DC is better than Marvel, and this is my opinion, because I'm not stating this as fact. But DC is better than Marvel. They do comic books better, comic book events, crossovers, solo series. They kill it, and they do animated stuff, at least so far, until Marvel does more with Marvel Studios. But they do animated stuff better than Marvel does too. But the reason that DC isn't as popular, I think, today, or like I would say it's not, is because most people know the movies, and the DC movies they've left a lot to desire.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yes. So I think so. I guess that's a long tangent for that. But Batman was my first, like the first one that I liked a lot. I think for two big reasons. I like the thought of just a guy kind of thing, right? Like you take powers out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the use of martial arts in it, right? He fought a lot. He's the world's best fighter, world's greatest detective, etc., etc. So yeah, it's a big Batman fan, and I like that you said Batman the animated series because it's really, really good, and it's on HBO Max. It probably doesn't. I've discovered recently that it's on HBO Max, and it probably doesn't hold up as well now as it did then, but it was really great, and the few things that I have seen as an adult have still made me want to watch it. So I plan on watching that now with my kids to try to hopefully perpetuate the cycle of Batman fans.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't watched it in like, since it was on probably
Right.
in the mid 90s. So I'd probably go back and watch it at some point, but I haven't yet. Other than like the Dark Knight trilogy, outside of that, DC kind of shit the bed, for instead of a better phrase, for a lot of it. And I feel like they've started to come back with the movies lately, until Wonder Woman 84 happened, and, which was, I thought, was dreadful. But I'm excited for like where they go from here, because they're doing such weird stuff. Like you're gonna have three Batman in the same year.
Yeah,
In two
yeah,
movies.
they're doing a lot of weird stuff with the movies, but I think they're doing the same thing that Marvel does with, so like going from WandaVision to the Spider-Man to the next Doctor Strange, they're introducing this multiverse concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I am one of the people shouting for Snyder to continue through with the movies, to like maintain all the plot lines that he had planned out, because he also introduced this concept of a multiverse, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
Flash changing time and going through the Speed Force. They also they're going to make a Flashpoint movie,
Yeah.
which is which literally takes place through the multiverse. So like they're giving themselves the same open pass that Marvel's trying to do with the same logic of like,
Yeah.
well, there's infinite universes with infinite Batmans and infinite Spider-Mans and like, so if Snyder can continue and that's how they justify it, I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, and now with because as of now, like they're being sold, so Warner Brothers. So now maybe they will, because they said a couple of months ago that they're not going to do anymore. But now, with when somebody else is in charge of the money, that they might decide to do like I think it'd be better if I'd rather be like actually in a movie, like a traditional movie theater setting. I know it was 4 hours and it was like I loved it. Like I think I gave it like a 9 out of 10 because I hated the first one.
Yeah, right. It is crazy how much of a different finished product you get with like 80% or call it 60% of the same footage, right? Like it was mostly the same, but enough big, like huge differences.
Yeah, and
it was so much better.
And it wasn't necessarily that it was that much. Like some of it is also just because my perception, because I had such a low bar going into
that
it.
Doesn't hurt. It's funny because like so I'm DC fanboy. I love DC comics and I'll see any DC property, television or otherwise, for better or for worse. I'm gonna give it a chance. But yeah, that's Batman's my favorite, but they just don't. I have really, really high hopes for the Robert Pattinson Batman to be everything I want a Batman movie. Like I'm doing the opposite of what you do with Justice League, because now I'm setting the bar so high in my head. Like I want so much out of that movie. Even if he's not the like Earth Prime Batman in that universe, right? I just want so badly for that movie to be a good like Batman story. It looks like it's halfway based on The Long Halloween, which you have with you. So and that is one of my favorite stories. Yeah, I'm stoked for that. Hopefully they can redeem themselves with that movie alone. But a lot of stuff that they have coming out is unique. And like you said, they have opportunity now because it's not Warner Brothers anymore.
Yeah. And like the car in the new Batmobile just looks like, I just like that it's totally different from everything we've seen since like, because not Nolan notwithstanding, Batman 89, 92, 95, 97, Snyder's Batmobile, they all have like a similar look in ways. And I'm like, this is totally different. And that's why I like Nolan's, because it was just like a tank, basically, right?
This term is really it's funny where you draw the line of things that matter and don't when you use the word realistic when you're talking about any superhero property, right? But it's like that's part of, again, going back to what I liked about Batman. He's always kind of like a normal guy doing crazy stuff. That's what this Batman movie that's coming out looks like, because it looks more like a car the Punisher would drive. It's just like a black muscle car, that's like armored out or whatever.
Yeah.
So I just like that. It makes me like it even more because it's quote unquote realistic, even though it's about a guy who dresses like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. It's one of my favorite words that nobody ever knows. It's called verisimilitude, which is like the appearance of being real.
Yeah. Okay. Right? I was gonna say there's another person here that didn't know it.
Yeah. I heard it on another podcast, a movie podcast. And it's so often that when you lose a verisimilitude or the appearance of it being real, like you lose so much of like it's when things like fall apart in the narrative, like and you just don't buy it anymore. Like, I mean, you're already buying a guy that's dressed like a bat and is protecting a city like Gotham, right?
Yeah.
So it's you're already taking a leap there, but it's once you lose that suspension of disbelief, you lose people. And granted, you could be watching stuff like Lord of the Rings, which is totally fantasy. So I mean, Lord of the Rings is great, but
well, it's funny because realistic to what the just like they world build, like authors world build, there's like a logic building.
Yeah.
So as long as it fits within the logic of this universe, then it doesn't stand out in any way, right? That's kind of where what matters is that it's like he can't make Superman bleed. It's like, okay, you're right. You're 100% right. It's like he shouldn't have but he can hit him. He can't make him bleed. So if that happens, then it becomes whatever. People have the same complaint when Batman makes mistakes, because they do that a lot in the comics. And like he make in the movies it happens too, but like he'll make massive mistakes a lot of times in comic books, and like there are a lot of people that kind of get all ruffled up about that because it's like, well, he's the world's greatest detective. He should have known that they were going to know that he knew that they were going to whatever, right? It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it
He, sh-
becomes,
he should always be like 3 steps ahead in his checks, right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's why I find like Batman and Iron Man have been like the most relatable to people because they're real people. Like they don't have any superpower. Like they're
Money
both
is the
rich.
superpower.
They're like that's his line in Justice League and like Robert Downey Jr.'s in was it Civil War or
Yeah. They say like,
it's one of them where he
what's
said
your power? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he says take away the suit. What are you? And he's like billionaire philanthropist playboy. Yeah. So all right. So we talked about superheroes again. And I love it because I can talk about them. I didn't read all the like I wasn't big in Marvel as a kid, so I had to when Thanos started showing up in the post credit scenes, I would Wikipedia Thanos. And but yeah, I was much more a Batman and X-Men fan. So all right, so moving on from that, we're gonna kind of wrap up the show with what I call Brett's Corner, which is I ask you 5 questions. I'm actually going to ask you a 6th one as a bonus, but
Ooh,
I didn't tell
question.
you.
Bonus question. Yeah, I've had time to prepare for these, and somehow I'm still not fully
Yes, see, there's
prepared. It's
there's one
weird.
person that was asked all 5 and was not given a heads up. So when he hears this, he's going to be happy about that. All right. So number 1, what is one movie, TV show, or event? Could be physical or not necessarily pop culture. That are you're most excited for in the coming year?
Well, why don't we maintain the theme
Okay,
from where
sure.
we just were? And I'll say because you use the word movie in the question, and immediately what comes to mind is that Matt Reeves Batman movie with the Robert Pattinson Batman, and I can now say that it is a year because I think. Oh, not technically, because it's the 21st, and I think it comes out May 22nd, or it might have just been May.
But
It might have just been May 2022.
well,
But either way, close enough.
This episode's unreleased for another 2 months. So,
Oh, perfect. Edit that out.
Yeah.
Take that out of here. So yeah, I'll say Matt Reeves
out.
Batman.
Yeah,
Matt Reeves.
Even more than Shang-Chi.
I am just again because it's Batman.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
It is. I have a hierarchy of things that get me excited, and Shang-Chi checks a lot of boxes, but it doesn't get enough of a cumulative score, so to speak, to trump Batman.
He's not part of the Holy Trinity, so
right. That's exactly.
All right, number 2.
Superman sucks. I'll say that.
What's that?
Superman sucks.
Superman sucks.
I'll say that. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't really do a good Superman movie. But anyway, number 2. What are 2 non-health related goals for the next year?
First would be I want to get. I'll say as many as possible, but why don't we? I want to get at least one gold medal in a jiu-jitsu tournament or competition. I've done several. I have multiple bronze medals. I have multiple silver medals, but I do not have any gold medals for having done this 3.5 years, right at this point. So that is one big goal, is at least one first gold medal. And then I would also like to, I have, for those who aren't super aware of who I am, I guess before listening to this, you may not know that I do some stuff online. Like I have a podcast. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. I do just a lot of things, including coaching other people. And that's actually been going really, really well lately. So it is my goal for the next year to hopefully be able to, but I do still have a part-time job now that supplements like how I make a living. But really what it does is it affords me some of the luxuries, right? Some of the things that aren't needs, but are more wants. So I make time to have that job to supplement it. It's just funny. But at the end of the day, I would like to be able to fully transition to just all in on my own stuff and not have to do the working for the man thing,
Hey, very cool. I'm sure you'll get there soon, even if it wasn't in, the next year, but I mean, you got a lot going on there between the podcast and coaching and jiu-jitsu and part-time job. So number 3, if someone came to you saying they were lacking motivation to stay consistent with their goals or anything in their journey, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
So three pieces of advice. Number one, you have to remember why you started, and it has to matter. That's a big one. And again, not to be judgmental, just saying simply, I want to look better, like the going back to vanity, as long as that is important enough to you, if you're being honest, if that really is the thing that's most important, then, and that's why you started, then remember, just whatever your reason is, remember why you started doing it in the first place. That should always at least help stock a little motivation, even if it's not enough. Another big way that I find motivation, I follow people, athletes, influencers on social media, / listen to music, watch a movie, watch a YouTube video or YouTube channel. Just find, like, there are undoubtedly people out there that are similar enough and resonate with you enough to kind of get you fired up in some way, right? And that you can feed off of them and look to them for that extra boost when you really need it. And that's number two. And then number three is kind of, as harsh and not nice as this may sound, at the end of the day, you kind of just have to do it. You have to accept that you're not motivated and understand, or execute anyway. You have to do the thing even though you don't want to do the thing. It's kind of cliche and it's kind of severe, but it's totally true. So those would be my three things.
Yeah, that's one of I know a lot of people listen or read Goggins stuff, and that's one of the things he says always is, well, he says fuck motivation, but
Yeah.
uh,
I have more faith in it than that.
yeah,
But it's again, it's like you said, it is a tool. So when you don't have it to work with, it's, you still got to do the job, even if you don't have all your tools. Right here, I am with analogies again. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Number 4. What have you discovered about yourself during your journey that surprised you the most?
Oh, so this one was. So we've already kind of let it out. I think that you gave me these ahead of time. And I'll be honest, this was not the hardest one, but it was a difficult one. That gave me a lot to think, like much longer about this one, because I learned a lot of things about myself, good and bad. I've leaned into the good ones and I've tried to work around the bad ones, and I feel like I'm in a pretty good place. But in all honesty, the biggest difference, the biggest thing I learned about myself is that for my whole life, I was kind of labeled as lazy. I felt lazy because I had one understanding of how people, quote unquote, should live or do. Like, essentially, I always had a reputation as being lazy, both with myself and with other people. And then at a certain point, I kind of realized that it's not laziness. It's lack of enthusiasm or engagement, because when I care about something, like when something matters to me, like comic books, like jiu-jitsu, like losing weight did, at a certain point, like when I care about something, any of these things that we talked about, I have coaching, I have a podcast, like I have a very strong and disciplined work ethic with things that I care about, more or less. So, it does present challenges, because not everything you have to do in life is engaging, right? Even not fun thing. Like working out is engaging, but it's not always fun, but it's still like important enough to me to do it. So like it can work for negative things or positive things. But yeah, when I'm not, like, there are just parts of life. So I do have my struggles with that, but yeah, I realize that I'm not lazy. I perhaps have a difficult time forcing enthusiasm, maybe a good way to say it.
Yeah, definitely. I can roll with that, because I've had those moments as well, like where you're just not engaged. I'd say not engaged in it because it's not something you care that much about compared to like any of your interests. All right, 5th question, which I think is probably the hardest one. If in 150 years science fails to save us and all that is left is a book about your life, what would be the title and what would the blurb tell us about Ben?
So this was hard, and I'm somewhat afraid that I'll disappoint with my answer. However, there is a term that I've heard. I heard it first from Mark Bell. I'm not positive if you're familiar with him.
I am.
So like I heard, but he used the term less fat. And it goes back to earlier when I said, like, I still have the fat kid in there, but I just I've learned how to manage it, like live with him as opposed to fighting with him, right? We live harmoniously now. So I really like the term less fat. And I tried so hard to think of a way to call a book about me less fat. I also had the thought that it's really unfortunate if a book about me is the only piece of literature left remaining. In the end, like that almost sent me into a depression. It's so sad to think about. But so I liked, hang on, I wrote a couple things down. So I liked Less Fat, the evolution of former fat kid Ben Phelps. I liked that one.
That's good.
I tried to work in the concept of no longer fat on the outside, always fat on the inside. Tried to work that into it too. And then silencing your inner fat kid. That was one thing that I thought of, but that sounds more like a self-help book than a biography.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so sorry if I disappoint, but I really just love the term less fat. And if someone's going to write a book about me, and it's going to be focused on like the stuff that we talked about here today, I hope that is the title that they roll with. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And number 6 now, I guess, which may prove to actually be the hardest because I didn't have time to think about it.
No, this is probably, I think this won't be that hard. So, as you know, like I'm weeks away from being a father. What would be a piece of advice you'd give me as a new dad?
Oh, am I allowed to give 2 pieces
Sure.
of advice? Okay.
As long as one's not sleep.
No, none of that. Nothing too cliche, but I will start with the one that is probably going to be the most cliche. But the reason that I start with this one is because it's really, really important because I was so young when I got married and had kids, particularly with my oldest. I didn't like soak it in as much as I would have liked to. And that it kind of sucks, you know what I mean? To feel that way. So I guess appreciate every moment. Like these are all what the things I'm going to say are probably going to be good general pieces of life advice. But specifically, as a dad, I guess, like really, I don't know, take it in, take pictures, force memories, like enjoy all the time because you really do start to realize that you don't get it back. And as I had a much easier time accepting that I wouldn't get time in my life back to do things for me as I had an easier time accepting that about myself than thinking that I lost time of theirs. You know what does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then the other one, which may seem almost counterintuitive to my first point, but I think it's very important. It doesn't get talked about a lot. And it's also good general life advice, but I think specifically going on the father thing, something that I struggled with a lot, particularly going back to my 80-pound regain when I had some like problems. I never took any time or care or attention of myself. And I don't want to make this some like self-care bubble bath bullshit, right? Like I'm not trying to sell that message, but like take time for you. I'm trying to reach for a cliche. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? So like take time for yourself too, because the better care you take of yourself, the better version of you're able to give them in the moments that you are with them, I guess, so to speak. So yeah, just appreciate everything. Like whatever you got to do, you be the annoying person that takes the pictures, even if whether you want to show them to people or not. Like just do it, man. Cause like I don't know. I wish I had them. And then on the other hand, take time for yourself because you are also important, even though there's someone else important in the situation now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. All right, Ben, that'll probably wrap it up here. Before we go, I wanted to give you a chance to let everyone know that they can find you for your coaching, your podcast, as well as if they want to reach out to you on social media.
Golly. Thank you. I don't know if I'll have a lengthy opportunity after this to speak again. So thank you again for having me on so early in the infancy of this podcast. I look forward to potentially returning
Definitely.
Once you are many, many, many episodes in, we can review the Batman movie after it comes out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But no, I do appreciate you asking me to come on here. Appreciate it. The same reason that I do my podcast and I share other people's stories and experiences, because just because someone follows me and likes me doesn't mean that they can't absorb anything from other people or find other people. Like you said, we find each other or other people on podcasts all the time.
Mhm.
That being said, you can find me on Instagram at ben.jitsu. You can go to benjitsu.online. That's my website, which links to everything else that I do, including that Instagram page. I am benjitsu on YouTube. I don't do a tremendous amount of quote unquote, I'm not a vlogger or a YouTuber or anything, but I have a YouTube channel where I just put up things that are relevant to me, important to me. I put up podcast stuff there. So check me out on YouTube, check me out on Instagram, go to my website, and yeah, just come hang out. It's all about I always say my mission, and I say it on my podcast, but it's really my mission at this point in life is I just want to inspire, inform, and entertain people to strive to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I want everybody else to do. So come do it. Yeah, come do it with me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did that here today. So
I like to think so.
Yeah. So it was great having you on. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, is that a donut behind you?
It is. It is a donut. Is there video for the podcast?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Oh, it drowns out because I don't have the light on in front of me. But
Yeah.
so one thing I didn't plug in my places where you can find me is I'm on Twitch, so I stream video games from time to time. Another nerd aspect of me that's kind of been a carryover from being heavy and stuff. But yeah, the donut lights up and it's like strawberry frosted and stuff. It's really drowned out now because I don't have my other lights on and stuff. I didn't think about that.
That's all right. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask because I'm sure people will watch this and be like, what is that, a donut?
It is a donut. It's a tribute to that fat kid that will always reside in here, right? It's my tribute to him as we continue to live peacefully together.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So I will add all that information in the show notes, and we will see you next time here on Becoming More. So until then, become more consistent every day.